Hello, this is Dr. Grande. Today I will analyze the case of Dima Tower. First I'll look at the background of this case, move to the timeline of the crime, then offer my analysis. Dima James Tower was born in September 2001 in Ukraine. When he was about 7 years old, his mother died. Dima spent a few months with his brother and then his uncle before being sent to an orphanage. In 2013, a married couple from Florida named Robbie James Tower and Jennifer Christine Tower encountered Dima on a trip to Ukraine. They were both Christian missionaries. Unable to have children of their own, they started the process of adopting Dima and flew him to the United States twice to visit with their other family members. In 2015, when Dima was 14 years old, the couple adopted him. The family lived in a 1,500 square foot house at 1240 Malacote Road in North Point, Florida. This is 44 miles north of Fort Myers. Dima did not speak English when he moved to America, but he learned the language from listening to conversations he referred to as small talk. Right away, it became clear that Dima had a severe anger problem. For instance, he wanted to take up boxing, but not because he was interested in the technical aspects of the sport, rather due to a desire to hurt people. In high school, Dima regularly became involved in fights with other students. Before he could be expelled, he dropped out in the 10th grade. Dima was also violent toward his adoptive parents. For example, he pushed Jennifer, and in 2020, he was arrested for domestic violence after throwing Robbie across the kitchen. Robbie ended up with a black eye. Ultimately, the charges were dismissed, and Dima moved to West Virginia to live with Jennifer's father. Later, Dima returned to Florida and moved back in with Robbie and Jennifer. The couple wanted to give him another chance. This would turn out to be a disastrous decision. Now moving to the timeline of the crime. On August 31, 2023, just before midnight, a neighbor who lived 2 houses away from the Tower family home called 911. She reported that she heard banging on her front door and heard a woman screaming, "I need help, I need help." When the neighbor looked outside to investigate, she did not see a woman, but there was blood on the sidewalk right in front of the house. When the police arrived, they saw Dima covered in blood standing near a black Chevrolet Sonic parked in front of the Tower family home. He closed the trunk, walked to the driver's door, entered the vehicle, and drove away. The police pursued Dima for several miles. Eventually, they were able to disable his vehicle using a spike strip. Dima stopped on the shoulder of a roadway, exited the vehicle, and ran into a wooded area. The police pursued him, but the conditions were not ideal. It was dark, there was thick vegetation, the area had several canals, and there were alligators. Dima managed to escape. As the police continued searching for him, other officers looked inside the Tower family home and made a grisly discovery. 49-year-old Robbie and 51-year-old Jennifer were on the floor face down in the master bedroom. Their heads were next to each other. They had both been stabbed to death. Robbie had sustained 68 stab wounds and Jennifer 79. There was blood around their bodies and in many other locations inside the house, including on the front door, in the kitchen, and on the couches. The police found 2 steak knives that were used in the murders. Dima's DNA was on one of them. The other one had been cleaned and returned to a butcher block in the kitchen. Investigators believed that Dima had killed his adoptive parents. On the next day, September 1, 2023, not long before 8 a.m., police officers who were searching for Dima stopped by a Shell gas station in Nokomis, Florida. This is 22 miles west of the Tower family home. A bystander approached the police and said the man they were looking for, who by that time was all over the news, was behind the gas station. The police walked out of the rear of the gas station and confronted Dima. He was arrested without incident and charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder and 1 count of fleeing to elude law enforcement. The police interviewed Dima for about 45 minutes. He was antagonistic, cryptic, and disorganized during this interview, and did not supply a lot of information. Here is a summary of what Dima said. The situation between him and his adoptive parents was complicated. He had argued with Robbie and Jennifer about family issues, but there was no argument right before the murders. He did not like his adoptive parents. They never taught him anything. They loved him, but they were controlling. His adoptive mother, Jennifer, acted like she was the head of the household, which aggravated Dima because he believed men should be in charge. Dima had been mad at his adoptive parents for a long time. On the day of the murders, he sat in his vehicle outside the family home after working a 12-hour shift. He was angry and thought about killing them. At some point, he consumed whiskey, but he claimed that the alcohol did not contribute to his homicidal behavior. Dima entered the house and went to his bedroom. Not long after this, he retrieved a steak knife in the kitchen and entered the master bedroom where his adoptive parents were sleeping. He stabbed Robbie first because Robbie was more physically capable of resisting. While he was murdering Robbie, Jennifer fled from the house. This is when she ran to a neighbor's house and said that she needed help. Dima chased her down and ordered her back inside of the Tower family home. He told her to sit on a couch and lectured her. During this time, she was pleading for her life. Dima repeatedly stabbed her. Jennifer managed to crawl into the master bedroom, where she died next to her husband, Robbie. At some point during this attack, Dima used a second knife. Dima indicated that he had been through a lot in his life. He said, "I'm basically a nobody coming from nowhere." He also revealed his escape plan. His mission was to make it to Orlando, Florida, where he would sneak on board a ship to get back to Ukraine. Dima believed that Orlando was a coastal city. Geography was not his strong suit. Dima went to trial in November 2025, over 2 years after he committed the murders. The state argued that Dima premeditated the murders. Clearly, first-degree murder was applicable. His defense attorney never argued that Dima was not guilty of any crime. Rather, he asked the jury to convict Dima of manslaughter instead of first-degree murder. The idea here was that Dima was not capable of premeditation because he was emotionally scarred after being abandoned as a child in Ukraine. The insanity defense was not introduced at trial, although Dima did allude to his mental health status. On the stand, he said that he was definitely insane, came from a harsh environment, and was brainwashed in school. Under cross-examination, he admitted that he thought about killing his adoptive parents twice prior to the murders. On November 14, 2025, Dima Tower was found guilty of all charges. During sentencing, the judge referred to him as an evil spirit and gave him 2 terms of life in prison to be served consecutively. In the state of Florida, life in prison means life without the possibility of parole. Now moving to my analysis. Dima Tower maintains his guilt, but not for first-degree murder, rather for the lesser charge of manslaughter. His attorney argued that there was no premeditation. The state, of course, disagrees. They believe the evidence is overwhelming. Dima disliked his adoptive parents. He thought about killing them. Then he murdered them in a brutal manner. This brings me to the question, was Dima Tower guilty of murder? Let's take a look at the evidence, both for and against the idea that he was guilty, starting with the inculpatory factors. Dima had a history of violence. He threatened his adoptive mother, Jennifer, physically attacked his adoptive father, Robbie, and would get into fights with other students at his high school. Dima indicated that he was in a rage prior to the murders. He sat in his vehicle and thought about killing his adoptive parents prior to entering the house. Robbie and Jennifer were defenseless at the time of the attack. They were asleep. It's not like they provoked Dima. Jennifer managed to exit the house during the attack, but Dima chased her down, brought her back into the house, gave her a lecture, and stabbed her to death. Even if an argument could be made that Dima killed Robbie in the heat of the moment, there is no question that the murder of Jennifer was premeditated. After the murders, Dima destroyed evidence by cleaning a knife. He fled the house and later admitted he was trying to leave the country. Now moving to the exculpatory factors. Dima claimed that he was insane, saying, "I lost my mind. I did not know what I was doing." There is no doubt that he had a rough childhood. His experiences in Ukraine could have led to PTSD, reactive attachment disorder, or some other mental disorder that would have reduced his culpability. When considering all the evidence in this case, do I believe that Dima Tower was guilty of murder? Yes. In my opinion, he was guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. The jury made the right decision. He did not mount an insanity defense despite claiming to be insane. No mental disorders were documented, and when he tried to talk about his mental health on the stand, the prosecutor and the judge kept shutting him down. One would think that if Dima had been evaluated by mental health clinicians and found to have a serious mental disorder that reduced his culpability, this information would have been introduced at trial. The absence of this defense suggests this never happened. Perhaps Dima was mentally ill, but not with an illness that helped his case. For example, it's possible that he had something like antisocial personality disorder. He was violent and knew the difference between right and wrong. What do I think happened in this case? This is just a theory, my opinion. Dima Tower had a terrible childhood. His mother died when he was young. He was moved around from one home to another and ended up in an orphanage. Nobody wanted Dima. When Robbie and Jennifer found him, this had the potential to completely change his life. He was extremely fortunate. This was his chance to no longer be a nobody from nowhere, as he put it. The couple tried to help Dima. They gave him a home. Later, they purchased him a car. They really wanted him to be productive and successful. Despite being handed this amazing opportunity, Dima was simply too damaged to take advantage of it. He was full of rage and hate. He hated Robbie and Jennifer. He hated the United States. Dima was violent and out of control. Despite the clear signs that Dima was dangerous, Robbie and Jennifer were very committed to helping him. They needed to believe that he could be rehabilitated. Unfortunately, this assessment was incorrect. The last item I want to talk about is how there have been strong reactions to Dima's time on the stand. Some people viewed his testimony and came to believe that he was self-centered, arrogant, calculating, and antisocial. He was trying to manipulate the system by being disruptive because he had no other defense available. All he could do was throw his little temper tantrum and waste everybody's time. The trial was fair, Dima was beyond redemption, and his sentence was just. Other people watched his testimony and felt a little differently. They saw someone who did not understand everything that was going on in court. When he tried to express his feelings and talk about traumatic experiences, the prosecutor and the judge kept interrupting. He was never really permitted to mount a defense. If somebody is facing a life sentence, they deserve a chance to speak their mind to the jury. There have been plenty of trials where defendants have rambled on for several days. For example, Jodi Arias. Why wasn't Dima afforded the same opportunity to tell his story? People who viewed the case in this way believe that the system simply wanted to dispose of Dima as quickly as possible, get him in prison, and forget about him forever. Nobody cared if he had some type of mental disorder that mitigated his culpability, because the crime he committed was too awful. It represented a deep betrayal. He murdered people who tried to save him, which nobody can forgive. Here's my opinion on Dima's testimony. Dima knew the difference between right and wrong, but committed the murders anyway. He needs to be in prison for the rest of his life. At the same time, I do believe he should have been allowed more freedom to tell his story. It would not have changed the outcome, but maybe he could have offered some insight into his homicidal behavior. People could have learned from what he was saying, and perhaps this could prevent similar crimes in the future. His time on the stand did not appear to reveal any clear symptoms of mental illness. There was no smoking gun, like something that made him appear psychotic, or anything like that. I believe he was disruptive in order to manipulate the system. He wanted to portray himself as the victim by pretending that Robbie and Jennifer treated him terribly. This is the only way he could make his crime look even partially justified. Dima thought that living with his adoptive parents was terrible. Spending life in a Florida prison might lead to him changing his mind. He said that he hated America. Well, he's really going to hate it now. Those are my thoughts in the case of Dima Tower. Thank you so much for watching. I'll talk to you soon.